and welcome to day 20 or 21, I'm not sure anymore, of Read Instead, Autism Acceptance, blah, you know the drill. Today's topic is about learning to drive as an autistic person, which sadly a lot of the time is still sort of a necessity, however bad it might be for the environment. Well, but learning, the prospect of having to learn how to drive can be very scary if not even sure if it's possible at all. But I somehow managed. I'm still impressed by myself. So, I wanted to try to give some tips on what I learned on the way. Literally. No. That was just a good pun. Sorry. But first of all, sort of as a disclaimer, driving is difficult. I believe to have read one of the most difficult mental processes we have to do as humans. And often it's also sort of the first kind of thing that you do sort of as an adult and on your own. I think it's like the first thing that a lot of people have to pay for on their own and so on. I mean, it kind of depends on the driver, the minimum age for learning in your country, which I know varies. It's more or less in my country it's more or less 17 basically, but I was 19 when I started, so did it quite late and only because I had to. Well, first of all, sort of the first thing I did would be because I was quite unsure about if I would be able to do that kind of thing at all, is I went to a sort of practice place with someone else who, one, owned a car and two, could drive. Well, because again, in my country it's not legal to drive if you don't have a license. And you have to learn with like a professional driving instructor in a special car that has like brakes on the passenger side as well and so on. So I don't know if this exists somewhere else, it might not, but here there's sort of these places where you can go to drive, where you're allowed to drive without a license, as long as there's one there who has one, and that are sort of like practice places, and they do, I don't know what their exact purpose is, but you can do that there, and I think they do other stuff. I don't know how they earn money, but you can go there and practice. And I also had a car that was an automatic car, which I think to American people might sound strange, because as far as I know, automatic cars are like the general rule there, maybe? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But at least like here in Europe you can find quite a lot of stick shift cars, and I had to learn that with my driving schools, because most driving schools only teach that. There's very, very few that teach automatic, because if you learn with an automatic car, you're then not allowed to drive the other one. But since a lot of people still have the other ones, that's sort of what everyone learns. Yeah. But automatic is slightly easier because there's one less pedal to think about. So even if you're planning to learn the other way, automatic first can be a good idea, because you can sort of get the idea of driving and then add another thing that you need to think about. And the second thing There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once again. The second thing is that expect that it will take longer. And be sure to, have the funds and the time to take longer. Because what my experience was that it took me quite a long time for a lot of things to sort of become automatic things that you do, like checking over your shoulder when you're turning and stuff like that. And I had a bit of bad luck, but I took over a year. But again, that was also because, well, actually, that brings me to my next point, which is if you are learning with a driving school, which can be a good idea because some schools also have sort of simulators, which is, I've heard, I didn't have one because I live in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have that option, but you can learn there without having to learn in reality and there being real dangers. Although again, also a driving school, and another good idea for driving schools is again because usually, I think in some countries it may be different, but the driving instructor has a second pair of like brakes and so on their side. So if you get into either just a generally dangerous situation or if you start, I don't know, experiencing shutdown or meltdown or whatever, they can take over and drive somewhere safe. And so that's obviously helpful, and that's sort of a safety net. But that said, one should examine the driving school first, because that's the problem that made me getting my license take so long. Because, because a lot of the time I think because getting their license is sort of the first thing that people do as adults, assuming they can afford it or can work to, afford it. Driving schools, I think some driving instructors, which are probably not very nice people in that case, they sort of take advantage of that, or that was my experience, that I ended up in a driving school where the teachers sort of took advantage of the fact that most people that didn't really know how to handle adult stuff like bills and so on, so he didn't put the bills correctly, like in the correct legal format, and then he didn't, he actually wrote down that I did certain things, because there are certain requirements in my country, like you have to have driven a certain amount of time at night and on the highway and so on. And he wrote down that I had done things that I'd never done, which I only found out later when I demanded the records of what I'd done to change driving schools. So yeah, there's I've from my experience gathered a few points that you should ask the driving school or find out about the driving school before you enroll there, and also often just checking on the internet, just checking if just searching after the name of the driving school and checking if there's usually there's some rating portals for driving schools as well where people can leave reviews, and just looking at those and checking if, there's a lot of people writing that they had bad experiences with that particular school. But then sort of for finding out what I think is helpful, and I might have to go back to driving school because I might need an extra certificate for certain things. And what I would ask then, and what sort of my checklist is there, is first of all, how do they organize their driving sessions? Like, do you always get the same teacher? Do you always have the same car? How are they booked? Do you, like, can you do that over text messages, for example? Or, you know, do you have to phone, or do you do it personally, you know, every time you have a lesson? And then also, how do they record them? Because usually they have to keep some kind of record. They will have to keep some kind of a record, because you'll have to pay them, obviously. And especially if there's certain requirements that, you know, the state wants, how are they recorded? How, if there's multiple teachers, how do they record what you've already done and what you've practiced? And what I found that, and I would always prefer a school where I can take those records. So for example, with the second one I had, which was generally, it was decent. I didn't personally like the instructor very much, which can also be, you know, a criteria if you just personally like the teachers. If you're really uncomfortable with them, that's not going to be a good experience driving, and you're probably going to be distracted. But, you know, I mean, they spend a lot of time with, you know, neurotypical teenage, young adult people, so they can sometimes be a bit weird. But I always prefer to, you know, keep that I have a record, and we had a sort of little book to where they would write things down that I could take with me, and it was actually sort of pre-printed book for that purpose, and it also had specific tips on like how to parallel park and so on, which was actually really, really nice. And I should find that book, because I need to look at that again, because I cannot parallel park for the life of me anymore. And then, you know, obviously also, does the driving school, the specific driving instructor, do they listen to your requests, or, you know, do they take you seriously? And of course, do they handle all the legal stuff correctly? Which, if you don't know, you're gonna have to find out sooner or later, and better do it now, believe me, before, you know, you end up having problems because of that. And then lastly, fifthly, I think it's, or at least for me, it was a very good idea to learn when there was not much else going on. So like something like the summer holidays, or, you know, something like that, when you're not already exhausted from other stuff. And even then, especially in the beginning, it can be very helpful to only have very, very short lessons, because at a certain point it's very, very likely, if you're autistic, that you'll be overwhelmed. And obviously then, I mean, there's no learning effect anymore anyway, so, you know, why drive? So, and that's, I would say, if, you know, that's something where you have to debate the driving school, that might already be not a good idea. But I also know that sometimes you sort of just have to deal with the one you have, because, in some areas you don't really have the choice of a lot of driving schools. You just kind of have to take the one that's near you, you know, because you can't drive anywhere. But yeah, that was my tips for that. If you have any more, please do leave them in the comments. Or if you have any other experiences about driving and being autistic, or if you drive at all, or if you don't want to because you don't think that you could, or, you know, that's fine. I mean, driving is difficult. If you don't have to, I mean, you do a lot of good for the environment to then not. And also, like this video, maybe. I just do my dance, and you will have your own reasons for why you do or don't do that. And yeah, if you haven't already subscribed to me and my channel, I would very much appreciate it if you did. Of course, only if you want to watch more videos of me talking about stuff. But if you do, then I will hopefully see you tomorrow. Goodbye.